at home and abroad, on our agriculture, our economy, our foreign relations, our justice system, our governance, our international competitiveness, our education, our world class festivals and entertainment, sports, politics, regional cooperation, and much more. Globally positioning Dominica within the Caribbean. Join the conversation on the Global View on Q. Tune in, call us, have your say. The Global View on Q, only on Q95, the big station.
A pleasant good evening to you at home, in your vehicle, if you are on the road or at work or listening on the radio or on the internet in Dominica or abroad. Thank you for choosing Q95. This is the Global View on Q. A very, very warm welcome to all of our Q family listeners at home and globally. It is Tuesday, 5th May 2026, the 18th Tuesday of 2026, and it's 8 p.m. in the studios at Q95, the big station. We're live on our radio frequencies and on QTV. Please follow us on Facebook and YouTube at Q95 FM Radio. Share the live, like our pages, or on your phone numbers or on the homepage of our website at www.q95da.com. Get the latest breaking news and reviews on Q95 because you know it's true if you hear it on Q. We continue to revive the spirit of graciousness, love, peace, prosperity, and unity among our Kalinago and Afro-Caribbean brothers and sisters. This is our 13th Global View on Q show for 2026. And we continue to engage with our local, regional, and global Q family listeners and friends of Dominica. I'm Sheridan Gregoire, Mr. G. With me is my co-host, Justice Dr. Irving Andre, social scientist Simeon Joseph, former Dominica UN Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, and political scientist Professor Alex Bruno. Good evening to all you very gentle people. Tonight's show is in three segments, really. So the first, the reconfirmation exercise started in October 2025 and ends in October 2026. I believe there will likely be a general election in Dominica by November, December 2026. So we will review the collaborative readiness of the opposition forces for that snap election. We see what happened in Antigua just recently with just a low voter turnout, some maybe 25 or 30% of the electorate turned up to vote. Secondly, we will explore the functions, the composition, and organization structure of a future electoral commission in Dominica with a view to delivering campaign finance reform and truly free and fair elections. And then thirdly, we'll examine the merits of amending Dominica's constitution by a future administration to adopt a bicameral system of governance powered by local governments, which clearly separates the powers and functions of the executive branch from the legislative branch and from the judicial branch, removing, as it is now, the power from the hands of just one man. So here are some talking points. Should the Electoral Commission members resign? Should Wayne James and Hillary Shillingford resign? Why should they? What would that achieve? If the Commission members resign, would they not simply be replaced by other party favorites? It appears to be more than likely that there will be a general election in Dominica in November, December of 2026. Will the Election Commission oversee a truly free and fair election? Will it take the appropriate steps to ensure that all eligible voters are registered and confirmed and issued voter ID cards, given its inefficient registration reconfirmation process? Are the opposition forces collaborating and preparing their selected candidates with a platform and a slogan to register, reconfirm, to persuade, and mobilize people in communities and constituencies to vote for them? As all politics, as we know, all politics is local. Should the Electoral Commission in a new administration be reconstituted to include representation from agencies like the DAIC, the Bar Association, the Employers Federation, the clergy, the Trade Union Congress, civil society, political parties, and other major stakeholders? Was it an error not to ensure that campaign finance reforms were included in the electoral reform exercise? Now, with all this talk about political divisiveness and the collaborative party politics, would Dominica be better off with a government made up of collaborating political parties, or a government of national unity, or with a system of proportional representation, rather than the current winner take all parliamentary system inherited from the British Westminster model? Now, given a small population like that which exists in Dominica, would it help to allow for the best and diverse human capital among our politicians to govern? Would a collaboration of party system, including independents, best deliver government of the people, by the people, and for the people? Or should a future administration in Dominica amend the constitution to replace the existing Westminster model of government with a bicameral system of governance powered by local governments, which clearly separates the powers and functions of the executive branch, the legislative branch, and the judicial branch? So we look forward to the contributions of Justice Dr. Irving Andrick, social scientist Simeon Joseph, former Dominica UN Ambassador Crispin Gregoire, and political scientist Professor Alex Bruno on the topic, we will review the collaborative readiness of the opposition forces to face a likely general election by November-December 26. Then we will explore the functions, composition, and organization structure of a future electoral commission in Dominica with a view to delivering campaign finance reform and a truly free and fair elections. And thereafter, we will examine the merits of amending Dominica's constitution by a future administration to adopt a bicameral system of governance powered by local governments, which clearly separates the powers and functions of the executive branch from the legislative branch and from the judicial branch. So as usual, we invite you, our Q family and friends of Dominica, to help us give a huge shout out and big thank you to our farmers, healthcare providers, our frontline workers, police and fire officers, teachers, doctors, nurses, and public and private sector patriots and friends of Dominica at home and abroad. We welcome each and every Dominican and friend of Dominica to the Global View on Q. We embrace you wherever you are, in every nook and cranny, in every village, in every community at home in Dominica, in the region, and globally. Thank you again, Sherwin, for keeping us on the air. Thank you so much, Lambi, on the console directing the telephone traffic. We will take your calls. As you know, the people's voice is always a priority on the Global View on Q. And as usual, each panelist will divide their contributions in separate presentations, and we get a chance to make a closing remark. So I go now to Justice Dr. Irving Andrick for his first 5-minute review of the collaborative readiness of the opposition forces to face a likely general election by November-December 2026. Dr. Andre, you're muted.
Yeah, good evening to you, Mr. G. Good evening to my fellow panelists. Good evening to your listeners. Charmaine and Lambi doing a human job as usual. It is a pity that dedication to service is not replicated throughout Dominica, but so it is. The question is whether there is a sense that the opposition forces have acted or will be acting in a fashion where they can prevent or present a unified front to deal with the whole question of the general elections, which is really very much on the horizon. The jury is still out with respect to that question. It is still out because, again, we know that elections cost money. We know that a semblance of unity is essential to give people the assurance that they can openly support a force, not just a party, but a force dedicated to ushering a new day in Dominica. And again, I am not on the ground, so chances I have to defer to those who are. But it seems to me that this is still a work in progress. It seems to me that there is still much work to be done. It seems to me that those who are looking for signs that we have arrived, we have crossed the Rubicon in terms of presenting a united front. Those folks are waiting with bated breath for the assurance that, yes, we are there. I can openly support by way of my physical presence at meetings, at gatherings, by way of my monetary presence, as in order to donate monies to run a campaign, that in fact this is the most concerted attempt to rein back the forces of dictatorship or autocracy in Dominica. Efforts have been made since 2005. And it seems to me that unfortunately, one of the reasons why those efforts haven't been successful is the sense that all the forces who seek a better Dominica have not been united. It is easy to cast fingers at those who may be responsible for that reality, but casting fingers will achieve nothing. What we should all look forward to is to find out whether we lack that inner strength and the inner fortitude and that rectitude and that determination and that dedication to move forward in a united front. Like I said, the jury is still out as to whether we are quite there. But hopefully, those involved in the actual campaign, and I say campaign, hasn't officially started, but quite frankly, it has been in progress for probably over a year. They are making that effort, taking that extra step to deal with those issues. The main issue will be electoral reform, but I'm told that that is for a second installment in terms of the presentations. But let me just say this as my opening salvo. It is as early as 2008 that Dominicans were made to understand that, quite frankly, the Electoral Commission has absolutely no intent to prosecute the war for free and fair elections in Dominica. That was evidenced by that infamous email where someone, an advisor, a lawyer of the Prime Minister, warned him that reforms would destroy his electoral legacy. So clearly, the fight is not with the Electoral Commission per se. The fight is with those who are the directing minds of the Electoral Commission. So calls for resignation of the Electoral Commission, with the greatest of respect, will achieve nothing. And again, the question is, as you raised, Mr. G, the composition of the Electoral Commission is set out in the Constitution, I believe, is Section 56. If that remains, then you can change and you can have resignations until the cows come home. It will be business as usual, because the Electoral Commission takes its standing orders from the leadership of the country. And again, why would I call for the resignation of James and Hillary? They have fought the good fight. They have been the conscience of the nation in that commission. What have they done? Let those who are without sin cast the first stone. But in any event, I leave that for further discussion, and I will keep my mouth shut at this time. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for these opening remarks, Dr. Andre. I want to go to Crispin Gregoire, former Ambassador Crispin Gregoire. Crispin, your thoughts? I mean, we have all seen what is going on in Dominica. As Dr. Andre said, the campaign has not officially started, but we've seen things like the Gospel Festival. We've seen a jazz festival. We see a lot of things happening on the ground. So it is clear that there may be an election in here. In fact, I mean, if you had to follow Antigua's footsteps, it seems clear that the election is inevitable, because, as I indicated earlier, the reconfirmation process started in October last year. It is intended to keep this going for 1 year. I as Dr. Andre saying, I doubt that anybody who's in charge of the Electoral Commission would allow it to extend by the 3 months that they propose. So in fact, I am presuming that it is very likely there will be a general election by December of this year. Your thoughts, Crispin?
Yes, good evening, Mr. G, and good evening to my fellow panelists. And good evening to the listeners and viewers of Q95 Global View. It's great to be on this program tonight with this illustrious panelists. And hopefully we can deal with these issues. Mr. G, well, you know, to speak about the Electoral Commission, it takes me back to the fight for electoral reform. One of the core elements of that reform was the reform of the Electoral Commission. But what happened was not the reform of the Electoral Commission. It was just some cosmetic administrative changes. One of them being that now the Electoral Commission can get its budget directly from the national budget and not wait for the Ministry of Finance to string them along and not give them the money until it gets close to the end of the fiscal year. So now there is the provision for them to get an automatic transfer of money when the national budget has been approved. And I think that's laudable. That should have been happening a long time. I don't know why the Electoral Commission has been hamstrung as far as finances go. And that's what's been going on for the last 20 years. When I think of the reform, the most important reform, the second most important reform, second only to campaign finance, which was not done, and I'll address that too, is the reform of the Electoral Commission. And what are we reforming of the Electoral Commission? It's to end the deadlock in the Electoral Commission. The Electoral Commission of Dominica has not been able to make consensus decisions. And I will quickly hasten to add that the Electoral Commission's success and a passing grade, its ability to make consensus decisions that are in the best interest of the Dominican people. As it is now, and as has been going on for the last 20 years, the Electoral Commission is deadlocked. It cannot make a decision by consensus. The decisions are by partisan considerations.
You know, Crispin, I was hoping that in this first round, we would talk more about the collaborative process in the opposition forces in terms of
I'm coming to that, but I
was hoping that we would do the Electoral Commission and electoral reform in the second.
I see. Okay. All right. Well, on the question of the collaboration of the opposition, the opposition parties exist. As we know, we have a multi-party system, and parties are free to compete and organize to get the electorate to place their confidence in them. The question of, is the opposition ready? I don't think that question really is one that maybe they're not as ready as we would like them to be, but they're ready. They've been promoting for many years an alternate agenda than what the government is putting forward. So they actually have some things that they believe in. I think that what is needed now is how these opposition parties lock their arms together and form a grand coalition. And that is the only solution to challenging the Labour Party. Thank you.
Yes, thanks a lot, Crispin. So, but do you think that, like me, do you believe that it is quite likely that there would be an election by the end of the year?
Well, let's say I begin to see signs of an election. For example, the Labour Party standard operating procedures. In recent years, they start their campaign with a gospel fest. So the moment they have their gospel fest, I know election is on the horizon. That is the beginning of the Labour Party campaign. Let's get that straight. The second thing is that I've noticed a lot of movements of the Prime Minister and others running overseas, going to dangerous places like Dubai, as they used to go to. looking for resources to run a big campaign. Well, let me say that meanwhile, the opposition is not just observing. They're beginning to realize that maybe in 6 months' time, we might well be at the polls, and they got to get their act together. Now, the reason why I'm not worried about whether the opposition is ready or not, I remember the year 2000. The Labour Party was not ready for an election. They end up getting 10 seats. Nobody thought that Rosie Douglas could bounce back, but he had a team and he had a strategy. That's what makes you win elections, Mr. G. You got to have a strategy. You got to have the team that will make that effort, and at the constituency level, you got to have the mobilization of the constituency association. And then you got to have a very, very good media strategy, this time with the element of social media being a big part. So that's what I see coming.
Yeah, so you seem to be seeing there's a role for someone like Simeon Joseph in all of this. So I will let him speak for himself. But Alex, let me come to you. I'm saving Simeon for last tonight. Your thoughts on this pending, as I said, the pending general election, and the state of the collaboration between the opposition forces to create one, significant force going into the next election. Your thoughts?
Yeah, well, I seem to think that this is the way to go. There should be a collaborative effort in the opposition. And I hope when we speak about opposition here, we mean all opposition sector, not just a party. Because I think I'm part of the opposition. And I don't necessarily belong to the opposition party. So until and unless we bring all our ideas together, and you spoke about Simeon being needed in a time like this, I mean, that's an understatement. We need him and more to come together and to help to guide, to strategize a way forward. Mr. Gregor, my dear friend, said that you need a team, you need leadership, and you need strategy. We had a Rosie Douglas in 2000. Who do we have in 2026? And how do they compare to what Rosie Douglas brought to the table? The opposition may not be prepared now, but we will be ready to contest an election. We have to be. And as I've said on previous programs, now is as good a time as any to win and to beat the incumbent. We just have to find a great way to do it. And again, I go back to Crispin again. Team, leadership, strategy. Rosie Douglas had the package. When an early snap election was called by Mr. James, he felt that he had the advantage, but with the asset that Rosie brought to the politics of Dominica at the time, it proved not to have worked out the way in which Mr. James expected to have worked. In fact, most of us felt that UWP might have gone again and win a second term easily, because the talk was Workers' Cafe Keshoy 2-2. But when you have the talent that Rosie Douglas brought, the team that he built, and the strategy, especially the media strategy was employed, the writing was on the wall. And that is what the opposition now must do. And if we can look around now to see who we have in terms of in the opposition fraternity, who compares to a Rosie Douglas right now? And if we are honest for ourselves, we will say that there's no Rosie Douglas in the politics of Dominica today. Do we need a Rosie Douglas kind of a character? Probably we do. Probably Simeon is that person. Simeon should probably decide, I'm going to get into the rain. I'm going to lead the charge, and probably build a united coalition around whatever he can do. Probably people say Thompson can do it. Probably, I do not know. Probably people say Joshua can do it. Probably people say Carlos. Who knows? But are we seeing it as yet? I don't think we are. And until and unless we have that kind of charisma to lead the charge for the opposition, I think we might have some misère to see again, political misère to see again, because one, the strategy must be focused and it must encompass and involve everyone. Two, we need the leadership to drive it. And three, we need the message that could appeal to Dominicans. Right now, Dominicans are not very impressed with what has been the alternative, and we have to do a lot of work to make our voice and our message resonate with the majority of people. That's how I see it. I do not know whether Simeon sees it otherwise, or or my good friend Dr. Andre, or even when we come back to Crispin as well. But I just call it as I see it, and I think we have some work to do. I am not counting out the chances of the opposition, but the opposition must take the chances. And when I say opposition here, I am not referring to one party. I'm referring to people who do not support the incumbent, especially those like Simeon and I and Crispin and Andre and you, Mr. G and Lambi and others who are willing to play an active part to see the return of that incumbent that has been in office for too long.
Thank you so much, Alex. Simeon, one of the things that was not said about the 2000 election is that the Freedom Party did play a role, and Rosie Douglas was able to work with Eugenia Charles, who said, take them out by any means necessary, at any cost. Your thoughts, Simeon?
Well, that's a broad that's a broad question. I have many thoughts on that issue. Good night to you, my fellow panelists. Good night to our listeners. Good night to Dominicans here, far and abroad, and all of the listeners. So you asked me a very sweeping question on my thoughts on that. Going back to 2000, there are many things that one can reflect upon. And both Alex and Crispin alluded to that. Crispin made some very important points about how the election in 2000 happened to be successful. And Alex alluded to certain reasons why it may not have been successful. Personally, I was one who advised against calling an election in 2000 because, being very much on the ground, being very much in the rural areas, particularly Calabishi, and particularly because in the latter part of 2000, Rosie Douglas shared a very harmonious relationship with in the 90s, 97, with my father. As a matter of fact, my father was one of the persons who engineered him becoming the political leader of the Dominica Labour Party after the death of Mike Douglas. Because remember, after Mike Douglas died, Pierre Charles was the acting political leader of the Dominica Labour Party. And in October, following the death of Rosie Douglas, there was a strong mobilization to have Rosie become the leader of the Dominica Labour Party. So Rosie Douglas was no stranger to my home. He was no stranger to my father and to my family. Everybody knows that the family of Sylvester Joseph was stead in the Labour Party. As a matter of fact, the first meeting of the Dominica Labour Party was held at in Calabishi, was held at my grandmother's home in Calabishi. I had a brother who went up for the Dominica Labour Party. I was the first president of the Labour Youth Organization at the time. And so the connection to Labour and the Joseph family was not unknown. So mindful of all the schematics that were taking place behind the scenes, mindful of the fact that I think the UWP had not very successfully gained the reins of power as they thought. Edison James in 1999 or 98 made the statement, "Your government is in charge." I was always skeptical about that statement because the establishment, the status quo, the public service, the legacy of the Freedomites who resided in the government at the time did not give the UWP the light of day to be an effective government as they wanted to be. And I felt that the UWP should have continued going to their full term, where they would be able to consolidate their reign, so to speak, and then where they would be able to sell to the people of Dominica the need for them to regain in power. When I look at the 2000 election, I am often reminded of a verse in scripture with the crucifixion of Jesus, where in the Gospel of Matthew, it says that Pilate and Herod came together to crucify Jesus, even if they were the worst enemies. So 2000 was a semblance of that. The Freedom Party and the Labour Party were far apart, and yet they came together to remove the United Workers' Party from power. But again, that many ingredients played its part. We had opportunism, of course, that resided in the blood of Charles Angelo Savary, who always wanted to ensure that he was part of the ruling status quo. There's no doubt about it. And that is where many times I see my mother as a prophet, because I remember in 1979, long before the overthrow of Patrick John, my mother said, what happened to this man called Charles Savary? He wants to be the president and prime minister of Dominica, because people saw in him that avaricious appetite to be in power at any cost, and it was there, and it reigned through his tenure as a member of the Freedom Party, and so he saw the opportunity, and that is why I see this man as being one. I mean, may not have been behind the scenes. Crispin may know better, but I saw this man as one of the main instigating architects of the coalition and subsequently of the current regime that we have in power today. I maintain as a theoretical statement to be proven, or that can be proven, that Charles Savary is one of the main engineers for the quality and the type of government that we have today. Because I mean, the spirit of opportunism resides deeply within him to ensure that is there. So I saw, that also opportunism played a part with the leading people of the Freedom Party at the day, and the naiveness of the UWP at the time, and the opportunity that the Labour Party saw to use the Freedom Party to get into power. I think Rosie Douglas said that he's been in opposition. He's not going to lose that election. And it was made clear. It was said at a meeting in Calibishi, on the flat, Alex Wood Nowhere by Mouter Shop. When he came to Calibishi in 2000 to campaign, he said, we're not going to lose that election. And then the opportunity for coalition came, and Edison James made the statement, no coalition. So that, in essence, I think isolated the other branch of the working class, the other branch of the labor force in Dominica, who would come together. The best opportunity when we're talking about collaboration for governments would have been the UWP, and which with the majority of former laborites who had departed from the Labour Party and the Labour Party to stay to come together, but the lack of the willingness to accommodate and the lack of the willingness to come together to defeat the Freedom Party at the 2000 election, I think caused the Labour Party to be gravitated and come into that unholy alliance with the Freedom Party to get the UWP out of power. And that's how I view the 2000 election. And of course, we know the statement, remove them at any cost. That was a statement that, I mean, that lingers in the memories of the 2000 vocabulary, so to speak, when Eugenia Charles said, remove them at any cost. And that, why is it?
Let us not forget, Simeon, that also one of the things that happened was this situation with Gonzalez, and Edison James about Eugenia Charles, and that's one of the reasons Eugenia Charles was very, very upset with Edison James.
Yes, well, they're all these things, but we know. I mean, Eugenia Charles, for all intents and purposes, couldn't be considered as an icon of a lady for her astuteness in good governance, for her demand of accountability, for her sternness in trying to maintain that strong moral and ethical code. Give that to her. But there's one thing that many people cannot deny about Eugenia Charles, is that she was a very revengeful lady. There are enough stories between different people in Dominica. When Eugenia Charles decided she was going to come for you, she would come for you no matter what. And that is a given. People know that. I mean, talk to Freedomites, talk to many people. She's a lady. So she had her sterling qualities of being that shining light on a hill in many regards. But from a personal perspective, Eugenia Charles, I can tell you, I remember her speaking about Patrick John, and Alex can tell you that she said, I just don't like that man. I just don't like that man. That was a statement she made. It's recorded in the voice and that kind of thing. On the 25th of March, 1975, when my father was chief elections officer, after she stopped a vehicle on the corner of High Street and DBS, and she said, Sylvester Joseph, the day I get into power, I'll be good for you. You will suffer. And she did when she came into power. I was in the vehicle with my father, along with my sister Mima at the time, who was teaching at Maho School. And my father was dropping me to Portersville to buy bread. And she had her cream Oxford Marina car. And she stopped right there. And she said, I'll be good for you. So, I mean, that kind of thing, in spite of that. So, I mean, those kind of the bad blood, so to speak, I think provoked a lot of that kind of thing. So it was a multiplicity of factors which I think caused the UWP to lose the election. One, I maintain, I think the UWP was very naive. I think they overplayed their hand of the support that they thought that they had. I think it was foolhardy of a government that was only in power for 4.5 years with a plan of many things to just call a snap election. And when there was no need for it, there was absolutely no need for it. And to think that you're going to surprise your opponents without thinking that at that time the Labour Party was growing in strength, especially between 1994 and 1999. The Labour Party was absolutely growing in strength. Mike Douglas had died, and when he died, the Labour Party was just beginning to turn around because the Freedom Party was diminishing. And the UWP was formed. There was a massive exodus of laborites from the Labour Party to the United Workers' Party because they felt the Labour Party was leading them nowhere. But when Rosie Douglas took over the Labour Party, one sensed a strong galvanizing towards the Labour Party, chiefly because, and Mr. Gregoire Crispin would allude to that. Remember, between 1975 and 1990, there was a strong alliance movement, which was not too much in bed with the Dominica Labour Party, except for Pierre Charles. And so, because remember what in the 1980 election, where the Alliance Party contested almost every seat that they wanted the Dominica Labour Party to lose. When you go back to the results of the 1980 election, every seat that the Dominica Labour Party lost, one can say was as a consequence of the alliance in the election. Now, when you do the statistics, and I have the figures, and I would challenge anybody to go to the electoral results of 1980, the combined votes of the Democratic Labour Party and the Dominica Labour Party far surpassed the Dominica Freedom Party in 14 constituencies. And the alliance movement was one of the strong movements that sought to ensure that Oliver Serafin and Patrick John did not come together before the 1980 election. And the results are there. I have it, and it's clearly to be seen. So we know those dynamics that took place. But with the ushering of Rosie Douglas as a leader of the Labour Party, you saw a massive turnaround and return of many of the strong alliance advocates to the Labour Party, which strengthened the hand of Rosie Douglas, which brought in a massive following of young people, which were not otherwise going to the Labour Party and would live with the Freedom Party, but were coming, which were not otherwise going to the United Workers' Party, because Alex, I think, is one person, I think, in the 2000 election who recommended to the UWP. I'm not sure, Alex, if you remember that they should try to bring down Beyonce because we didn't feel they had the support of their. You remember that was a suggestion of yours?
I remember that. Yeah. Yes,
that the young people could be attracted to the UWP. So I mean,
and we had the money as well, and the people willing to bring Beyonce
to attract the young people, and the UWP said no. So I think the UWP, for all intents and purposes, is a party that one wonders whether they have been able to understand political strategy. I'm saying that very clear. To this day, what is their operational mindset and framework of thinking when it comes to political strategization? Is that a correct word? And you've seen it today. I'm very concerned about that. And I'm very concerned about that because it is the strongest opposition party in Dominica. And if anything, they're supposed to be so organized and strategized with a good platform and a good message and the kind of momentum to get this current burden that is on the backs of the Dominican people out of power. And you have to be able to convince the people of Dominica of that. You have to be able to allow the people of Dominica to get buy-in and to gravitate towards you based on your messaging, based on your platform, based on the emotional appeal that you have for Dominicans, which apparently is not happening. And so that to me are certain nuances. So when you look at all these things, that's my reflection on the 2000 election, as I reflected over and over it, and to tell you, I think 2000 was a melee of various opportunity, and opportunism and opportunity mixed together from different factors, a certain level of naiveness and a certain momentum.
Now let me go back to Crispin, because Crispin can share with us some of the lessons learned from that 2000. I mean, all of the things that happened with the Alliance Party and the Labour Party and Rosie Douglas coming onto the scene and developing this relationship, taking up advantage of the opportunity that Eugenia was at war with Edison James, and taking advantage of his opportunity to create some kind of thing between the Freedom Party and the Labour Party, and then causing Rosie Douglas to form the government in 2000. Crispin, give me your thoughts, and then from that, what lessons can the current opposition forces learn from all of that?
Yes. Mr. G, I'm glad that Simeon took us back to 2000, because there are a lot of lessons to learn in the 2000 election that hasn't, in my view, been properly distilled. And that is, well, let me say that I ended up in that election purely by accident. I wanted to be in Dominica to see the beginning of the new millennium, and I arrived there the day before the then Prime Minister announced the election. And I got calls from both Pierre Charles and Rosie Douglas. They wanted me to attend the meeting in Belfast, and I went to that, and I was shocked to learn at that meeting that Rosie Douglas was appointing me as one of the co-managers of his campaign. He hadn't talked to me yet. And frankly, I couldn't say no. It was like, here's this elder statesman asking me to do something for him, which I know I could do, but, I said, political leader, I'm only here for 2 weeks. He said, yeah, of course. Yeah, we'll take 2 weeks from you. And I got thrust into this thing. And Mr. G, to be honest, I didn't think that the Labour Party had a chance. They didn't have money. They didn't have candidates fully in place. They certainly didn't have a media strategy. And then who are the people that's going to run that campaign? Because running a campaign is no easy work. I know I've run 3 campaigns already, 2 of them successful. One 1995 campaign with Mike Douglas, that was a washout. Oh no, 1990 rather than 95. And I know that when I looked, after I agreed to participate in the campaign team as a co-manager with Afi Martin, I started to think about what would be the strategy, because there was no strategy yet. And the thing that occurred to me as I walked through Roseau and listened to people talking, and of course, I hadn't lived in Dominica since 1989. And now I'm in this election of 2000, and I really don't know people. They know me, but I can't tell you who's who, because I don't know who supports whom, for that matter. So I began to talk to the Freedom Party. And it occurred to me in the first week that an accommodation with Freedom, not not a tight coalition, but what I would call a loose coalition, that we agree to collaborate in some ways, but we're running our own parties. We're not in a coalition before the fact, before the election. And to my surprise, by the time we get into the second week of the campaign, I'm seeing a shift occurring. What Simeon talked about, the youth are shifting towards the message. And the most important thing, we were hitting the radio every morning, noon, and night. It was like and we are calling a press conference every other day. I was running an American campaign. And we routed the UWP by the second week. Now, the thing is that the one thing that was missing in all of that is what would be our platform? What would Rosie Douglas do when he gets into government? Well, of course, we knew some things that were possible. Bananas was in his death rows. And Rosie had a very good idea, which was a strategic partnership with Europe via France. And we've never done that. That is something that is still to be done by a future government. I call it an economic partnership with Guadeloupe and Martinique. And you can add Saint Martin, the French side of Saint Martin, which is part of Guadeloupe. So in terms of administration. So we had that. But we also had something. Rosie Douglas' connection with the African continent was something that he could sell, and people saw promise in that. And that is still an arena for us to grow because we've not exploited that. We had opportunities to, in fact, one African government which supported Rosie Douglas came forward and said to this government, we will help you. And do you know what happened? This government did not accept the help from Algeria. And you know, these things are interlocked. They are interconnected. The reason why Algeria wanted to help Dominica was because Dominica, from the time it was independent, supported Western Sahara's independence, which this government ended up breaking that solidarity. Surprisingly, Ms. Shah's government supported that throughout, you know. So we ran this campaign, and then you have the death of Rosie Douglas, and then you have the death 3 years later of Pierre Charles. And what happens then? The Labour Party, what seemed to be a Labour Party, transformed into Freedom Party number 2. That's really what happened. And the rest is history. Mm-hmm. We've really been, from the time that Pierre Charles died, what has evolved is a Freedom Party. And the Labour Party people, like myself, kicked out of the Labour Party. Kicked out. And we became independent. So that is the situation we have now. Now, there's one thing that I should say that is still a variable that we must not sweep under the carpet. And Simeon mentioned it before. That remnant of the Alliance Party, the left party in Dominica, it used to be the Movement for New Dominica, became the Alliance Party, the Movement for Dominica Liberation Movement, as it was called in the election of 1980. It is that element that is still very much present in the body politic that we don't see it. It's got somewhat kind of invisible, but present.
Yeah.
And it is that force, it is that group that broke away from Roosevelt Skerrit and have never gone back and bowed before him, and will never do that. We were in politics long before him. We understand politics. We're not in politics for corrupt behavior. That has never been the Alliance forte. And today, we want Dominica to return to an order where there is respect in politics. There's a certain political behavior that is acceptable, not the crass kind of political behavior that has been the hallmark of this regime right now. So this is where we need to go. We need to, as we think about a future election, I think that the opposition can present a credible program to the Dominican people that will be vastly different from what pertains today. Thank you, Mr. G.
Thanks a lot, Crispin, for that. Alex, your thoughts on the lessons to be learned from, and I'm really pinpointing this 2000 election and what led up to the 2000 election, because there are vital lessons to be learned by the current opposition forces if they are to remove this particular regime from office, in the same way that these groups got together and removed the UWP from office in 2000. Obviously, Crispin and Simeon made some excellent points on that. You were part of the process. I mean, what are your thoughts on the lessons that could be learned from all of that?
Well, lesson number one is to strategize. Understand? You see, there's a difference between politics and power. You can play politics every day, but if you don't know how to acquire power and how to implement the right strategies to get into office, you're never going to get into office.
Right.
So I think the major lesson to be learned is strategy. What is it that we can do? First of all, how are we going to frame the campaign? UWP came up with a very wonderful slogan some time ago when they said, "Fear no more." It worked and they won. And other parties had slogans in the past which worked. I have not seen a very solid slogan from the opposition in about a quarter century since the first slogan, "Fear no more." Changes are must, scare it must go, and all of these they are just call phrases that do not really bring people together. And I'm hearing of a new slogan now about prosperity for all. That is yet to be seen. Does that bring people together? Does that call you to action? So I think, number one, Mr. G, the opposition, again, not just one party, the opposition must come up with a fantastic strategy, a brilliant rallying call that will be able to attract the young people the way Ruzi attracted them back in 2000. The sense of collaboration, which has been lacking, Simeon spoke to that the party at the time, again, UWP did not believe that collaboration is something that they should do. And I was told as well that even the Freedom Party would have wanted to speak with UWP as well. You cannot be in party politics trying to get into power and not think collaboration. That's how you get into office. That's how you win elections.
Such things because without interrupting you, Alex, in politics, there's no such thing as permanent enemies or friends.
No, you're quite right. And I think that seems to be one of the tendencies of
they're just permanent interests.
And that seems to be one of the little faux pas that the main opposition has made. Even people like me, I am still very much a strong supporter of the opposition party. But you have a lack of outreach. Hey, Alex, what's going on? How are you doing? What can we do? I heard your son died the other day. I'm sorry, let's talk. You know, there is no humanity. There's a lacking of that seems to be a problem. And again, as I said again publicly, I still do support the opposition in all its facets. But the opposition has to find ways to work with its people, work with resources. So again, Mr. G asked me about lessons learned. The lessons learned, or the lessons we should learn, is that we should look at politics as a business, the business of service. It's not a recreational art where you can just say what you want and expect to get into office. And give it to the Prime Minister of Dominica. He understands the business. Maybe he overplays his hand, and we will eventually figure that out. But you cannot be into politics in the modern era and not look at the strategy, not look at the data, not look at the science, not listen to the people, and just expect that people will just vote for you because they fed up of another party. And the way Dominica is right now, I think Dominicans will most likely vote for that same party before they vote for another party that they have no hope and they see no direction and they're not really attracted to. So again, lessons learned. Work with people, collaborate, strategize, get a strong message, build collaboration, because when interests come together, that's when you actually see the results around. And all the reform that we are thinking of doing can only happen when a new party gets into office. All the ideas we're talking about reform right now is not going to happen. There's no way it's going to happen. The reform that we're going to have is a reform through the vote. So the reconfirmation should be a major rallying call. Get people out there. Try to speak to the people who have already reconfirmed and get the majority of people to vote for you. And then when you get into office, you fix the country. You fix the issues that we have. Until and unless we do that, we're not going to see the kind of reform that I think Dominica actually needs, which is total reform, not just electoral reform, but constitutional reform. And I imagine we will speak about the form of government that will best suit Dominica at this time. I think you spoke about that.
Simeon, give us your closing remarks on this subject here that we're talking about. In other words, what are the lessons learned from this previous election that the current opposition forces could glean from this to organize and mobilize and, bring people together to rally with them?
Well, that's difficult given the Dominican context. When you survey past elections in Dominica, let's not also forget that in 2000, I consider there were some misleading statements made about corruption, about Edson James having a hotel in Barbados, about these other allegations that were never proven on after the elections. Rosie said, well, we had to say that too. We at one point, 2 statements were made. Rosie said we have to paint the prison blue. And Arthur Mate was one to have said that there will not be enough paracetamol in the pharmacies in Dominica when the UWP loses the election and people find out the mess we were in. Well, now we need paracetamol. No, we don't have enough pharmacies in Dominica. And that kind of thing. So let's not forget there were some false narratives that were peddled. And it threw my mind back to 1980 as well, because some of the very same things were said about Patrick John. I mean, I always tell people I am no defender of Patrick John, but I've always been very sympathetic to this man because a lot of things were said about this man, which when you go back in hindsight, were not very true. And so you look at the fact that, I mean, let's look at it. Look at the 4.5 years that Patrick John was in power, similar to that of the UWP and what he did. Now, anytime anybody wants to criticize Patrick John, they go to the coup of 1980 when Eugenia Charles was in power. So if you ask anybody to find me 5 things on one hand that Patrick John egregiously did during his time, they can't find it, except for the fact you had a very volatile trade union movement, a very vociferous Freedom Party, and you had a whole shifting of allegiances, because we have to understand in 1980, we have to go back to the 1957, 1961 political players, Frank Barron, the Jupinees, the Winstons, and all these people who shifted parties one to the other, the Duke Rays, the Stephens, and all these people. It's very interesting when you study what happened in 1957 election, and Barron became chief minister, but it took a while for him to become chief minister, and all the players in the political landscape of Dominica at the time, people going against each other, jumping ship back and forth, to find that they all culminated as a potent force against Mr. Libla in his latter days and all through the leadership of Patrick John as Prime Minister of Dominica to get him out. So you have to look at that. You have to look at 2000 as well, when, I mean, one of the statements, we had the Committee for Good and Accountable Government on the radio every Wednesday night, picking up all these little seeming irregularities and peddling all these things. So I saw 2 things. There was a similarity of selling corruption to the people of Dominica in 1980 and repeating it by the same players, by the very same players in 2000. There's no doubt about it. Rosie Douglas, Mike Douglas, were one of the people who peddled in 1980, and so again in 2000. So when we talk about lessons learned, let me just say that we talk about collaboration. But for any for there to be any healthy collaboration on the part of political parties, they have to look at what are the political philosophies that drives any coming together. So what are the structured set of core principles and values and beliefs that are shared between the group of players who are aiming to acquire political power? And I will say that I am not one who peddles the notion that you just have to come together to remove a government. That has never worked. It hasn't worked in Dominica, and it hasn't worked anywhere else. You don't. What I think we need to focus on is how, when you acquire political power as a collective, you implement specific policies with an ideological framework that will guide a platform, and that's the first lesson, that distinguishes one party for the other or the opposition from those in government, and shape an approach to governance and public policy. That's the first lesson we have to learn. So when we collaborate, we're not just collaborating to say we want to see the back of Skerrit and we put a group of people in government who don't know where they're going, what they are doing, what they want for the people of Dominica, what direction they want to head. No. To me, that you might as well leave Roosevelt Skerrit in power for 20 more years. Because what has to come together, to my mind, as a lesson from the past and the mistakes that we have passed, that we have for the sake of Dominica, is that one has to look at what are the core components of party philosophy. And so what is the foundational belief? For instance, is it liberalism? Is it conservatism? Is it socialism? Or is it green politics? And then what is the platform? What is the formal set of principles and goals that you stand together on? And so when you would have done that, you can set your goal. And the goal has to be a formal public set of things, of winning an election and exercising governmental policy and power to shape policy. Because that went 2000, up to now, one cannot say what is the philosophy, what is the direction, what is the core policy of this current government in power. We have a government that has very erratically run the country. 1 month is one policy, next month is another policy. One budgetary statement is one statement. One national independence address is another statement. A whole batch of confusion being ushered by a prime minister who has been assiduously and continuously just going by the whims and fancies without any focus on proper policy for government. So we have to be careful. And so if we are to learn anything from the last election, we have to be able to say what are the key concerns, what is the ideology, what is the political creed that you can come together. You can have different political parties with a common creed, you know. You can have different political parties that can develop a common ideology. You can have different political parties that will develop a party doctrine. You can have different political parties that can come up with a platform of principles and a kind of partisan agenda to drive the campaign. Because what you will need to do is to serve as an aggregate, how you call it now, collective of the societal needs, where you can educate the voters and where you are able to show that you will be able to function as essential tools for organizing government that we need. So we have to be able to do that. That's what I think is the greatest lesson we have to be able to learn from it. It's not just coming together for the sake of coming together to see because Dominica deserves better. Dominica deserves a more concrete government. Dominica deserves a better electoral system. Dominica deserves better governance and separation of powers. Dominica deserves a sound electoral commission where people are able to function with integrity and independence and moral clarity that prevents politicization, where we restore public trust and we set a precedence where we avoid the erosion of any sense of impartiality. That's what Dominica deserves today. And so when parties want to come together, be it, what is it, UPP or UWP or Freedom Party or whatever, we have to be able to tell the people of Dominica that we're going to provide them something better, that we're not going to govern erratically and erroneously and vi, because Dominica deserves better. We need productivity, we need manufacturing, we need export, we need a more solid society. Our young people have to have that sense of hope. And that is what we need when we say, well, okay, if we have to learn any lessons, so that when you put those things together, you are able to identify the best of the people in the different parties who you can present to the people of Dominica and say, these are the people you should vote for. So in spite of the different political backgrounds, there are those core things that brings them together, whereby any coalition can hold together. Because Crispin alluded to it. The people from the what you call it, the have left because what they stood for is no longer there. You understand what I'm telling you? And we're not sure if we have a diluted Freedom Party or corrupted Labour Party, quote unquote, for want of another word, if all is formed, because it's like a bouillon kind of thing, a large Labour Party, subsumed in a sense of Freedom Party people who want to say they are labor rights, and then they will continue to. Dominica cannot afford that anymore. That is, I think, one of the main lessons we have to learn.
Right.
Learn from the past. Just bear with me. Learn from the disorganization. Know what you are about. Identify the best among the rest. Present them to the people of Dominica on a common platform, with a common message, with a synchronized system, as Crispin alluded to earlier. And forget about, let's face it, no matter how corrupt Roosevelt's carrot is now, you're not going to take the next 5 years going to look for his corruption. Let that be dealt with separately. In the meantime, roads are to be built, schools are to be repaired, our healthcare system is to be improved, our farmers have to get a chance of a better life, our young people have to see their way, our young entrepreneurs. We will deal with those things as a common collective and let that kind of notion of just getting rid of a corrupt leader, you know what I mean? That's what I think.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot for that, Simeon. You've given us a good segue into the next segment. In fact, I don't know if Dr. Andre is still with us, but certainly, you've sort of created a platform for the opposition forces. In fact, that's what you've done. And Crispin again laid out all the lessons, and Alex laid out the lessons that could be learned from the 2000 election, and how the Labour Party, in fact, came into government. All right, so it does not look like Dr. Andre is with us, so I will go to Crispin. Oh, Dr. Andre, you're with us. Okay, so you've been listening to all of the submissions by Alex, by Crispin, by Simeon. I don't know whether you want to give us your own final remarks on the opposition forces and what the lessons should be learned to prepare themselves to go to face another coming election. And then, of course, to segue into the next segment of the discussion, which will be the Electoral Commission, electoral reform, and some of the ideas and suggestions that had been proposed for the reform of the Electoral Commission itself. And in fact, campaign finance reform was one of the things that had been forefront in the ideas that were suggested for reforms. Your thoughts, Dr. Andre? You're muted. You need to unmute your mic.
One of the main reasons that the Labour Party, in conjunction with the Freedom, triumphed in 2000 is to prosecute the war of corruption in a very successful fashion, which resonated with the Dominicans. The evidence is very clear that they used this as a battering ram, and it certainly resonated in the minds of the people. One of the signal developments in that election, you may or may not recall, was the discovery of 30 Chinese who came to Canada, and they all had one address. The finance minister of was it the finance minister? Yes, of the UWP government. Someone called, what's his name again? Julius Timothy. I happen to know it because I was called frantically at 5 o'clock in the morning by a government, a UWP operative, to deal with it as best as I can to avoid this exploding. And I had to recruit another couple of lawyers, immigration lawyers, to see if we can deal with this in a very quiet fashion. But this was one thing which, quite frankly, inflamed many Dominicans, both on the ground and in Canada and other parts of the world. And that was very much part of the campaign. So the campaign has to have, whatever campaign is waged in 2026, a unifying theme or themes that can galvanize the people, that can increase their sense of indignation, that can increase their desire to get involved in the process of getting back their government. Whatever that theme or themes is or are, I don't know. The folks on the ground will have to determine that. We'll have to take the temperature on the ground. But they do not have the luxury of fighting that campaign in splendid isolation. I think everyone has made that point. I think it's quite self-evident in my respectful view. And I think as the sooner that the folks on the ground, the leadership, who are fighting for democracy, they understand that, I think it will be the better for all of us. Frankly, I think it's self-evident. I don't think that they need to be schooled or lessoned with respect to that type of unifying campaign or trying to get a theme or themes which galvanize the people from all walks of life, from every political persuasion, to fight the cause of the redemptive or redemption for the Dominican people, for the Dominican democracy. The Electoral Commission, I mean, a lot of folks said we need constitutional reform. We probably do in many respects, but bear in mind one thing. The Constitution was based on a foundation of checks and balances. For the most part, our prior leaders respected that system of checks and balances. The only checks this government likes are those with the numbers on it, whether it's 100,000 or 10,000 or whatever. And the only balance that they're interested in is the balances in their individual accounts in whatever financial institutions that they deal with. The problem we have is the administration has a complete disregard for the Constitution. I remember somebody, I can't remember his name, who said openly and without any shame, no constitution can stop him from achieving A, B, or C. What we have is a systematic violation of every independent institution of governments in Dominica. And this is not a reflection that the Constitution is bad. It's a reflection of the quality of leadership that you have. You name it. The Integrity of Commission, the Public Service Commission. What was the first thing when, in fact, the membership was changed? The new leader, after making the sign of the cross 10 times, he abandoned the investigation in the Prime Minister in terms of his finances. You have every institution of governance designed to maintain this healthy sense of a check on the leadership being compromised or being contaminated or being corrupted by one mindset. And we have allowed that to continue with impunity. I'll never forget, I attended Oliver LeBlanc's funeral in October of 2004. And there were key political operatives who said openly, we will not.
Sorry, Dr. Andre. Simeon, could you mute your mic, please?
No, my mic. Oh,
yes,
sorry.
yeah. That's some noise coming through, yeah.
It sounded like a little pullet in the backyard, actually.
Yes. So just mute your mic.
Sorry about that. But I don't know. I'm quiet.
Yep, that's it.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Dr. Andre.
The point I was making is that these folk were quite clear. Just that Dominicans were blind, willfully blind. They said they will not die as poor as Edward Oliver LeBlanc. But you remember a famous comment made by the minister from Tatan or wherever it is about Patrick John. A similar type of sentiments. So we have nurtured that beast within our midst, because some of us actually benefit personally from it. And that is the problem that we face. And that is why every time you hear this one has switched sides, there's a journalist who has firebombed his car. And next thing he's saying, well, it is not because of the CBI program that the US imposed restrictions on Dominicans traveling to the United States. So we've allowed ourselves to be seduced by the god of money. And wasn't Rosie Douglas able to seduce a minister, a former member of the United Workers' Party from Castle Bruce? And she went on radio and said, well, God spoke to me, but nobody dared ask her which God spoke to her. Is it the God of Mammon or is it the God of eternal life? But this is the pattern in Dominica. Too many of our leaders, too many of those who have 2 degrees and more have allowed themselves to be bought like 30 pieces of silver. And that is why Dominica is in the state it is as we speak today. So whatever opposition, whatever coalition, whatever corporation that is presented to take on, to give Dominicans hope, has to negate and to negative that type of philosophy which is ruining Dominica like the plague. They will decide what language, they will decide what narrative, they will decide what themes. They know best, those who are on the ground. But there should be a clear distinction presented to the electorate. Here is what we stand for. Here is our platform. And our platform represents a negation of all that is corrupt, negation of any type of system where a few can buy multi-million-dollar homes, build them, with no declaration of income, with no investigation because the audit department is fast asleep. They should not be allowed to do so with impunity. So that is the message, in my view, whatever form it takes, that we mean to restore decency in government. We need to restore the means whereby anyone can aspire to become relatively comfortable, whether in the banana industry, whether in agro industry, whether in the tourist industry, whether in the artistic industry, for God's sakes. We need to give hope to every Dominican on the ground and also in the diaspora. We need to give those in the diaspora the message that, look, you can come and set up shop now. We will not treat foreigners better than you. We will not give 30 million pieces of silver by way of commission to a foreign person and to add insult to injury, make him or her an ambassador to Dominica, while those on the ground are guaying, are groveling for some pittances. We have to reverse that type of philosophy. Regardless of how you frame it, if you don't do that, then you will find yourself in perpetual slavery. I thank you.
And thanks a lot, Dr. Andre. Now, Crispin, to build on further on the platform that Dr. Andre just outlined, it's really sounded like a platform. All that needs to go, that is a slogan. Because all the time, some people are getting very wealthy. The majority of Dominicans are going. They're very poor. They can hardly pay for the electricity bill, and they can hardly pay for the groceries. They can hardly pay for healthcare. They can hardly pay for anything. The gas bills are just gone off the roof and so on them. So, I mean, your thoughts on this, and then what it is that the Electoral Commission is doing now to ensure, at least to give a semblance that we're going to have free and fair elections, and what in fact the opposition forces are doing now to ensure that people are reconfirmed and registered to give them a chance of the next election.
Yes. Well, Mr. G, I think that Simeon did refer to what I think is critical for the opposition now, and that is they must have a common program, a program that they agree upon collectively, a multi-party coalition. That to me is the only option for the opposition vis-a-vis challenging the Labour Party, because you have a party that's been in power for 25 years, and it's set in its ways, and it has manipulated the electoral machinery to its advantage, much to the detriment of the opposition forces. I mean, the kind of context that the opposition has been operating in for the last 25 years is actually one that will discourage you from participating in politics and on the opposition side. Because here's what you faced: consistent court challenges and problems, bringing opponents before the court and keeping them before the court for years. So that this is not child's play. You go into politics in Dominica, you better be prepared to get your hands burned by the ruling dictatorship. So these are some of the things that an opposition coalition, whether it's an accommodation before the fact, before the election or after, there must be something that holds them together. And Simeon very aptly spoke about that. Now, for me, I mean, I have some ideas as to what are the elements of that platform that the opposition would put forward. To me, the most important arena is economics. How are you going to run this economy? How are you going to build a new economy post this administration focus on CBI? CBI, I can't say CBI is going to die because I'm not a prophet, but all I can say is that CBI is going to face major challenges for its future existence going forward beyond 2026. Then I think the whole arena of democracy and political competition in Dominica, there needs to be some clearer rules of the game, because we are really in a very advanced autocratic kind of rule, and dismantling that is not going to be easy. So a new administration must have a plan before they get into office. How are you going to dismantle the corruption? Assuming you came to power, what are you going to do? I would say that one of the most important things that a new government would have to do is to have what's called a truth commission. Because there are a lot of political crimes that have been committed over the last 25 years that needs to be brought to the fore. Look at all of these diplomatic passports that have been given to foreigners. Look at the image standing of Dominica abroad. Is that something that we want our country to look like going forward? No. Then I will talk about, foreign relations. A new government must have a clearly different approach to foreign relations, a professional approach to foreign relations, and not to see aid as the only objective of your foreign relations, which is very much one of the things that's been the hallmark of this administration. On the question of political ideology, I don't even know what the ideology. We must have a core set of principles that relate to politics and political behavior, and that we don't have. Then, as we build a new economy, we want to think about the role that our diaspora will play and continues to play, because had it not been for the diaspora, our country would have already had a depression. I want people to know that. Without the Dominica diaspora, our country would have had a depression, because our diaspora is sending $40 to $50 million a year to Dominica, US dollars, not counting barrels and other things that they send. That's what is paying for consumption in Dominica. And until we get to realize that we cannot continue putting all the money that's sent to us from the diaspora into consumption, rather than putting some of it in savings for wet days, our people are going to be in a hand-to-mouth existence. And then do we do something about the resources we have, like water? Do we let that be part of the new economy that's going to evolve? So these are the things that I think the opposition needs to really pull together in a short time. They don't have a lot of time to do it. And I would say the other thing is, in our foreign relations, location. We are located between France, and through France, we are located in Europe. And we need to use that location better to position our country going forward. France, to me, is the gateway to Europe for Dominica. And we've not played that card at all. The next arena for us in the foreign relations is how we position ourselves to Africa. We've had a relationship with Africa for a long time. And the Africans want to compensate us, but we don't seem interested. So these are the things that I see. And I would say that our two neighbors, Guadeloupe and Martinique, become ever more important to us than before. So, Mr. G, that's what I see, a framework for a new political economic order in Dominica under new government. I think that's possible.
Okay, excellent. Now, Alex, let me just come to you to sort of to wrap up your thoughts on this segment there. You know, I mean, you know, you've listened to Crispin, you've listened to Simeon, you've listened to Dr. Andre. Your own thoughts about how the opposition forces could create a platform, you know, a philosophy to guide them into the next election, so they can appeal to the people. Obviously, what Rosie Douglas brought to the table was a charisma. So you're looking for some charisma there, but also you're looking for relations, not only relations with other political parties, but relations with outside forces outside of the country, like Crispin was saying. So your thoughts on all of this to sort of wind down this first segment.
Well, to be able to appeal to people, you need to know what people actually are asking for, what people are saying. And to know what people are saying, you have to hear and find out what people are saying. You cannot just assume people want that and give them what they do not want. And again, because of what I do, I will always refer or default to the idea that science is what drives politics. It appears as if everyone is an expert on Dominican politics, but it's one person that has been running the politics for a quarter century. So we are not all experts. We have to rely on people with different expertise in different areas. And you need to know what people are saying and trust what people are saying and give them what they want. And people are asking for exactly what we have been saying, a collaborative effort with a rallying call driven by some set of individuals with connectivity and charisma. Simeon spoke about people coming together with the same ideologies. Well, that's a little bit difficult at the moment, although it's a good idea, but ideology politics have gone out the door because we spoke about freedom or the new freedom being in the current Labour Party. And we all understand that. And if you look at the ideology of Labour and of freedom, they don't mesh. And at the time, we had a Labour government being led by a former Freedomite and a former Freedomite. It was a president. So we have had a smash in terms of political ideology in Dominica since after Patrick. After Patrick's reign, there had been no Labour Party leader run in Dominica, per se. Because if you look at Rosie Douglas, he was Alliance DLM. If you look at Pierre Charles, he was Alliance DLM. Mike Douglas, yes. But Mike Douglas was not necessarily going to win an election in Dominica anytime soon. So the ideology in politics, it would have been a good thing if we had maintained that. If you ask the present government, what is the ideology of our present government, of the present leader for government? And Andre spoke to that. Is it populism? What works for me is going to be what's happened. You cannot pin down a set ideology. So yes, I like what Simeon said in terms of likeness of ideologies coming together to form the next government. But at this stage, I'm not too sure that that's even the go-to. I think what really has to happen is what works best in the area that we are contesting in, which is the candidate that most likely is going to win for the opposition to possibly get 11 seats to form the next government. And then when we get to office, we start to say, okay, guys, the mission while we were contesting was to win. After you win, you have to govern. Now you cannot start thinking of how you're going to govern after you win. You must have a plan of governance, a strategy, a few set policies, as Crispin spoke about. So you sell that to the people. But the most important thing that we need right now in terms of the alternative is to find a way to win. That's what Dame Eugenia said. Take them out at any cost. So I'm not saying that we don't have to have a plan, but the plan should be to have 11 successful candidates at the next election. And parties must now start to think and start to do the polls and do the survey and see who is most likely going to win in that area, and let it be one person against a Labour Party candidate per constituency. The way it looks now with all the different parties and talks of independent candidates is going to be a big juboom and advantage Labour. So yes, the conversation should be had now. Don't wait until elections are called. I'm seeing candidates have been launched, all around Dominica right now. Is that going to resolve the problem of the opposition? No. The opposition need to be talking yesterday, last year, 2 years ago, and decide what works best. Yes, Simeon had a very good idea in terms of ideology, but at this point in time, in terms of the politics of Dominica, is salvation of our country. And then when we can find a team in office that can probably have that progressive conversation, people like Simeon and I, and Crispin and Andre and you, Mr. G, can say, okay, guys, now that we have really do, but this is serious business. Moving forward, we need to have a medium-term, long-term plan as to how we survive in government or how we revamp our country. Again, not going against Simeon, but saying that, yeah, ideology is one, but right now, to me, the most important thing right now is to find a matrix and a strategy to win 11 seats to form the government.
Thank you, Alex. Now, Lambi, I think we should take a break now to take a few calls from the callers if they want to call in and join us before we go to the final segment. So you please give out the numbers and let's ask the people if they want to make a call to join us in the conversation tonight.
The Global View and Q taking your calls right now. The numbers are as follow: 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257. Those are local numbers. The international or the overseas number is as follow: 305-432-9624. Let me run those numbers one more time. 449-3095, 449-3096, 449-3097, 616-4257, 305-432-9624. And we're standing by for your calls.
All right. So, Dr. Andre, in absence of the calls coming through, I just wanted you to sort of lead us into the next segment. I mean, we have a constitution. But you mentioned that a little earlier. The constitution has been there, but it's just that the chief executive has not been operating the same way that other leaders have operated in the past in terms of the constitution and the laws of the country. But it is clear that there's too much power in the hands of one man who's willing to manipulate the system. And so there needs to be something going forward for your future administration. I mean, just look at the Electoral Commission. So many recommendations would be to restructure the Electoral Commission so that it could be more independent, so that it would not take instructions from any one person, because it's supposed to be independent under the Constitution. Your thoughts on what it is that needs to be done moving forward to remove all this power in the hands of one man?
Well, our constitution is based on a system, certainly the whole process of election leaders, on a basic system of first past the post wins the lottery. And I say they win the lottery because, well, we know now what it means to be a governor a governing body run by that principle, first past the post, get all the spoils of power. Because you can't just rely on the inherent goodness of your politicians to adhere to the Constitution, to be thankful that they've served their public, to do like many of the Indian leaders. In fact, the one before Modi, he was an economist, a professor actually, that he was just thankful for having served and he left with dignity. And he retired almost in a kind of philosophical mindset. You can't just assume that your leaders will be cast in that mold. God knows we know precisely that that is not the case. And bear in mind what I said. The Constitution was developed on a system of so-called checks and balances. The composition of the Electoral Commission was predicated on that same philosophy. The president choose one of those fellows in our own so-called deliberate judgment. What deliberate judgment do we have today, Gasol? Huh? The prime minister, another two. The leader of the opposition, two.
You want to take a call, Lambi? Sorry, Dr. Andre.
Yeah.
Caller, please go ahead.
Hello, to the panel. I need to ask you a question, probably Dr. Andre can ask. Dr. Andre, if we have, I'm just asking, we have a commission that is not functioning. 323232. So nothing is happening. I am just asking what can be done. What can the president do? The president appointed the chairman. They are not functioning, please. Is there anything we can send to the president, tell the president, well, the commission is not functioning, especially the chairman, because he will like that all the time, free to, they cannot agree on anything. Dr. Andre, what can we do, please?
The answer is simple. They like it so. The president loves it so. The prime minister, it's been designed to achieve that kind of imbalance.
Yeah.
The only persons who can change that is Dominicans. Because what we have is a yoke around our electoral neck. And that is exactly what's happening. There is no independent deliberation, nothing is independent. Bear in mind who decided there should not be a leader of an opposition, despite what the Constitution says. The whole thing is a joke. And unless Dominicans are sensitized, ma'am, and you're a regular caller, very, 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 very concerned about Dominica's future, unless Dominicans become as concerned as you, then we have basically handcuffed ourselves and we have locked the cell in which we're imprisoned as a people in terms of our own democracy. It's only Dominicans can save themselves from that type of deadlock. And it was interesting. Let me say to the caller, a few months ago, the Sakinoy, the head of the chief electoral office, elections office, said, "We are all in this thing together." That's what she said in reference to Wayne James and my good friend Hillary. Can you believe that? We are all in this thing together. You have a dysfunctional electoral process. You have the suspension of confirmation for almost 9 months or a year. You have persons seeking to confirm and their names have not been confirmed on the official list 5 months after that they have done the thing. And then here is a kicker. A few weeks ago, the prime minister says, "Okay, all you need now is your birth certificate." And we praise him. Perhaps Jesus Christ has worked on him. We have to be more sophisticated. He's giving you 10 cents while taking $10 from you. Because their supporters are not having these difficulties in terms of the confirmation process. All the evidence suggests that. And they know how many persons have confirmed, and they know approximately how many laborites out of that total population has been confirmed. So this is the problem. This is the band movie that is going on in Dominica. But to the caller, salvation lies in the hearts and minds of the Dominican people. 1,000 novenas might work. You never know. But the last time I checked the Bible, God says that He will only help you if you help yourself. And we can't remain mute and disinterested or be content with a brown paper bag and expect serious change. If we have more committed persons like the caller, who has made it her business almost on a daily basis to seek edification and salvation, quite frankly, in terms of Dominica on the ground, then
Hold on,
we are
caller.
doomed indeed.
Yeah, well, let's take another call, Lambi. Oh, you lost the caller? Okay, you've lost the call. So now, while you're waiting for another call, Lambi, let me just go to Simeon. Simeon, so hold on one sec, Simeon. Let's take a call from Lambi.
Please go ahead, caller.
Hello, good evening, Lambi, and to Mr. G and the members on the panel. I think
Good evening.
we always provide information and give people an opportunity to be informed. And I want to commend you for it. Let me just say, though, in Dominica for the past 20, 25 years, we have been just been in the mode. For example, the Electoral Commission is responsible as referee to ensure that the electoral process or processes in Dominica is well managed. And the fact that the Prime Minister recommends two persons to be nominated by the President or appointed by the President, and the leader of the opposition two, and the President appoints the chairman, is to take this thing away from the partisan politics and give those in there an opportunity to be professionals who are focused on the right things to be done, work with stakeholders so that democracy can be well managed, well understood, and produce the kind of good and accountable results in governance in our country. What we're seeing today is far out of that. Now, what I find very funny, and people are saying that what really makes them not too interested in the confirmation process is the fact that you're already on the list, and they're going to confirm your name on the list. They ask you to bring your ID, which is fine, and bring birth certificate now, which is okay, but they ask you to bring a witness. Now, sometimes you can't get the person to go with you at the time you want to go, and that creates a setback. The other thing, though, when you go in there to confirm, you fill in the form. When you fill in the form, then another lady takes it, or staff, to enter on the computer. While the person is entering on the computer, you can see what they're entering. If there is an error, you can correct it right then. When that reaches the electoral office, I don't see why you have to have a panel of 12 persons to look at it to determine what. I mean, you register, the centers did the registration, take the information, and send it to the chief elections officer. The whole idea is to look at it and put you back on the list. You're confirmed to be back on the list. Why you have to have a panel of 12 persons, as she said, in some meeting that we had, to look at the names that come into her to confirm who should be approved for confirmation or not. These are just silly behavior that we have had in this country. I know where these people get their profession, where they get what they're doing from, but it's just foolishness. The other thing, though, in terms I heard you spoke about the question of a collaboration in terms of how we as Dominicans fight for good governance to replace this government. I think when you go on the ground, it is clear that people are saying that they want a combination of everybody to work together to ensure that we can pool resources. Because, to be honest with you, the kinds of money that Dominica had in the early days, where the business people assist each party, don't have it anymore. The government have a largesse of monies from passport and so on that they use, and they're all on a mission. It's not a mission about the countries, about themselves, and they put every effort. I just listened to Gaston Brong and a statement on May Day saying leaders who have been successful. I mean, you commend they have not, and you have a few things. Leaders who are successful, you see nothing wrong in giving $100 or $200 to somebody who come and ask, and that should not be seen as bribery. I mean, your duty is to create jobs for people to work and earn and look after themselves, and the country economy can grow and the country can be prosperous and so on. I think there's a lot of work to be done, but I thank you all guys who are explaining to the people and educating the people. But the people of Dominica themselves cannot sit there and expect somebody else to do it. We all have to come out. We all have to speak. We all have to recognize what is wrong and be bold about it. Don't be shy. Don't be afraid, because today somebody give you a handout, tomorrow you'll not be there where you stand. And that's the issue. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks a lot for your comments. You want to take another call, Andy?
Caller, please go ahead.
Hello.
Hello, good evening.
Good evening.
Yes, I've been listening to the discussion about the Constitution, and there are a few points I want to make. I don't think we realize, because it come to my attention that I look at the Constitution, that we don't know in Dominica, and probably in America as well, why a Constitution exists. We treat the Constitution as if it is just a piece of furniture we have that really is really irrelevant. So, for example, most Dominicans are totally unaware that every government that has sat in office since Patrick John has been a violation of the Constitution. Because the Constitution defined how Patrick John could be removed from government. It wasn't followed. And when Jane Armour became president, when the House met to install O.J. Simpson, all those were violations of the Constitution. The record is clear, but we tell ourselves, well, it doesn't matter because the Constitution doesn't mean anything. It's just some words that we have on paper. So if you violate it, we don't know what happens when the Constitution is violated. We don't know, for example, how checks and balances are supposed to work. We use the terms, but we don't know how they're supposed to work. We don't know why the Constitution has an oath of office and says that before anyone enters upon the duties of his office, that he must take an oath. We don't know why that is there. We are totally oblivious to the fact that we've never implemented an entire section of the Constitution, therefore making the whole thing of none effect. We think that that doesn't matter because we don't think that the Constitution is important. So talking about constitutional reform is wonderful, and I think I agree with anyone who says that those divisions of power are not clearly settled in our Constitution or form of government that we have, because the decision to become a republic was a last moment thing. But this problem that we have, where the people don't know why they have a constitution, and I'm very glad that King Charles got involved in that strange thing in America, where you had a king coming to America to tell a republic how its constitution should be run, and I don't think people really recognize the impact of that. I mean, how can a monarch tell a republic how can he know? And in fact, he does, but that's what we have. And in Dominica, we have the same situation. We don't know why we have a constitution. We don't realize that we have been functioning under unconstitutional government, and people are going to tell me it doesn't matter. I remember I made the last statement here because the two statements. I asked the former president, what is this about the fact that we have no parliamentary commission in Dominica? The constitution requires one. And he says to me, well, that's water under the bridge. I'm saying, excuse me? You took an oath to follow it and you think that it's water under the bridge? Now, I made those very same comments to the Prime Minister a couple of years ago, and he asked me, so what should we do? And I gave him the same answer that Mr. Gregoire gave a while ago, because that's the only way to go forward. Until we do that, we find ourselves, we are under the curse of a violated constitution, and we don't know what that curse is. Because the only way to handle that is with a Truth and Reconciliation Commission, because the pitfalls that we are falling into have to be addressed, they have to be faced, because we've got to come to terms with our constitution that people understand why it exists, what are the consequences of violating it, because if people understood the implications of violating the constitution, they would react to it much better. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, caller. Dr. Andre, the caller said that we don't understand the Constitution and we don't respect it. I believe we on this panel here understand the Constitution. I believe we on this panel respect the Constitution. I don't know whether you want to make any comment on that.
Well, with the greatest of respect, I don't think the problem has anything to do with we don't understand the Constitution. The fact of the matter is, from a legal perspective, going back to the 70s, the lawyers, for whatever reason, whether they were not retained, whether they could not marshal the financial implications, whether it's a matter of political allegiance, many of these alleged violations of the constitutions have not been challenged. That's the bottom line in Dominica compared to many of the other Caribbean islands. They have not been challenged. And many of these leaders that we've had have been allowed to get away with them with impunity. Therein lies the problem, whether it's under the Freedom Party, and I know there's been discussion about Patrick John, but many of these pieces of legislation, or certainly the Constitution, take for example, now I may be wrong, so hopefully somebody will correct me, the decision not to have a leader of the opposition. It may have been challenged, my memory may be wrong on this. And if I'm thinking about the same case, I think there was a decision that whoever sought to challenge it did not have standing, but I may be wrong. But many of these things have been allowed. Take, for instance, freedom of the press. You had a former Speaker of the Dominica House of Assembly banning a journalist from coming to the House of Assembly. That was never challenged. The fact of the matter is we have allowed these things to go, not because, quite frankly, we don't understand that there has been a likely violation of the Charter, of the Constitution, I'm sorry, but because for a number of reasons we don't want to piss off the political directorate, because, quite frankly, for some reason we cannot retain counsel to do it. For some reasons, counsel may be reluctant to challenge some of these things which may put them on the bad side of the political directorate. There are a multiplicity of reasons why these things have not been challenged. And that is one of the problems that certainly besiege Dominicans as we speak. They have been allowed to get away with it with impunity. And to a significant extent, that is part of the problem.
And Simeon, because the lack of challenges to those breaches of the law, breaches of the Constitution, what we find is that you have a regime in office that just acts willy-nilly, and I mean, all the power that the Constitution places in the hands of this chief executive officer of the country. All these chief executives before him did not manipulate the Constitution in that way. But yet, it seems to me that, I mean, we have found a person who's willing to manipulate that and to say, in fact, that, no law, no constitution can stop me from doing whatever I want. So your thoughts on this going forward, Simeon, because, we have to do something about any new administration coming in, would need to do something about this. You're muted. You need to unmute your mic. Yes. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, you're good.
Well, I think essentially, when we listen to everything, we are touching basically on two most crucial pillars of democratic health. Okay, how we have a healthy democracy, and one is how people get into power, that is elections, and how power is kept in check, or what you call the constitutional separation of powers. And so if we look at those two things, for instance, and that is why when we talk about elections, we cannot separate elections from a healthy democracy, and we cannot separate elections and a healthy democracy from what the Constitution says, what we have been discussing about, and what the Constitution is meant to be. On one hand, we have to look at and very seriously at the Electoral Commission as we have it now. Because I think we have moved past the conversation of if reform is needed in Dominica to how it should be implemented. And I think we have to come up with that question. We have to answer that question. I've been listening to a lot of the talk about electoral reform, and we accept the fact that it's needed. But I think one of the things that we're still embattled with is how are we going to implement electoral reform in Dominica? Because it's a given that we have a failed system. So when we have to think of something called a teeth factor in terms of biting, we have to be able to say that any future electoral commission in Dominica, shouldn't just be for observer purposes. It needs to be legal. It needs to have a teeth to audit party spending, because one of the threats to any election in Dominica moving forward is the incumbency of the ruling party. They have the machinery of state at their disposal. They have the finances of the state at their disposal. They have the resources of the state at their disposal. And they have the resources of government, as we saw in the last election, the number of government officials who were involved in the political campaign of this government, using government resources, using government vehicles, using government time to campaign for the current government in power today. So we cannot separate elections from finance. And one of the things that we have to do, as I said, is as any election body paying attention, is that we have to ensure that the Electoral Commission we have now moves from being an observer, where they can have legal teeth to audit party spending. And so we might want to explore the merits of a fixed ceiling on donations, perhaps, and a mandatory disclosure of what we call dark money from overseas. That's what we may have to look at. And let that be disclosed, because there's no doubt lots of money are coming in from overseas for every election that this government has oversaw. And we have to also look at the current composition, right? We have the president, we have the PM, and the opposition doing a 2-to-1 appointment. And so that alone makes it partisan. So we have to debate a shift towards a more independent civil society electoral commission, maybe made up of members from the Bar Association and the church, for instance, to break a deadlock. So we'll have to say, well, okay, fine, government appoints 2, opposition appoints 2, president appoints 1, and we have to maybe add somebody from the Bar Association and the church as part of our electoral commission to break any deadlock that there is. We need some civic representation on the electoral commission, and our constitution should be amended for that, because anyhow you look at it, any government in power is going to abuse the electoral commission based on the fact you have a 2-to-1 model. Okay, and so that will always be seen as partisan unless we can begin to change the panel, shift the panel from to a more independent body made up of society, as I said, the Bar Association and the church. And then, in addition to which, when we have to think of our democracy, we must, as I said last week, we have to look very closely at the separation of powers in Dominica. We have to look very closely at a bicameral government in Dominica. I said it on the program last week. We have to look at a more radical reimagining of the state. Dominica currently uses the Westminster Whitehall model, for instance, which was given to us, where we have the executive, which is the cabinet, and they sit inside the legislature. That means you have a rubber stamp problem, and we have to move away from that. And so that when a cabinet makes up the majority of parliament, the legislature, and so they will never hold the executive accountable. All right. And so we have to consider, for instance, what are the merits for a bicameral? I am all in favor of a radical change of the Dominica Constitution, a radical change of our system of government. Okay, one, reducing the number of constituencies and looking at our constitution, having a constitution review that is able to give us a better system of government, where we have, for instance, instead of a unicameral, a bicameral, something like a Senate that isn't just an echo of the House, you know, but which would provide a certain level of sober thought, not even like what Barbados, St. Lucia, Trinidad has, something totally independent. But however, we may have to think of the cost versus quality of governance. We have to look at that as to the numbers. And so can we afford it? Or rather, can we afford not to have it given the current centralization of power that we have in? There is too much centralization of power in government in Dominica today. And so what we need to look at perhaps is what we call true separation. And we need to discuss a system where our ministers cannot be MPs, similar perhaps to that exists in the United States or the French model. And which would be, I think that would be a fascinating pivot for the Dominican public to consider, where they simply can be held accountable for what they do by the legislature, where they will have to answer to the lawmakers for whatever they do while in government, where the prime minister and the ministers of government and the public servants, the senior public servants, the permanent secretaries, the what you call it, the administrators of state will have to account to the legislature so that we can have quality government. And I think one of the things we might want to ask ourselves further is, really and truly, is the current constitution still fit for purpose 45 years after independence? I think we need to consider that very clearly. Or are we trying to run a modern democracy on an outdated system? And because clearly, people talk about the constitution, but really and truly, we really have to go back and look at it. We really have to go back. I think our constitution today does not provide for good governance, does not provide for enough accountability. I think the constitution as we have it today, from the executive, the way the president is elected, to how the House of Assembly is run, to the complete autonomous and domineering and dictatorial style that the Speaker has over the House of Assembly, that the fact that public servants do not understand that they are accountable to the state and not to the politician or the prime minister, that ministers of government think that all they have to do is rubber stamp what cabinet says, etc. We need to really look at our constitution very seriously, and some future government has to be really brave and courageous and turn a leaf and turn over that constitution we have all together, so that I think we can have a better quality of governance, because I do not think our constitution as it is now provides for quality of governance that we need. I think it is outdated. I think on the eve of our 50th anniversary so these are, I think, some serious questions that we need to look at when we look at all this democratical questions that we are questioning. And so again, we have to look at the two pillars for a healthy democracy: elections, the lack of interference in elections, the role that finance plays in elections, and the role of accountability of finance in elections, and constitutional separation of powers. I think we are at a juncture in Dominica where our history, the kind of government that we have today, the kind of corrupted, twisted, egregious form of administration we have today should beckon us to be a trailblazer. And Dominica can perhaps present a new model to small island developing states as to how they can have better systems of government. I think any future government in Dominica, any future political power, cannot have it business as usual. We also need to put things like a maximum number of ministers in our constitution. And there are lots of things that we should sit back. I like the fact that Crispin said we need a truth and reconciliation. We need that. We need that going back to 1979. We need that.
Term limit as well.
Come to term
limit as well.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. Term limits. Those things must be ingrained in the Constitution. And once this is there, the people who are elected into office will no longer be rubber stamps, but they will have to be able to account to some kind of executive accountability for Dominica. So if anything, the mistakes of the past, particularly the past 20 years that we see, particularly the fact that the Prime Minister can have a press conference tomorrow and just call an election, or maybe he was trying to do it on Friday gone, but because of the disaster in Salibia, he didn't call it and think, well, okay, it can just be a thing that he has in his back pocket. And one of the things I saw tonight, looking at the election, we have a notion, you know, I'm just going to throw it in there. I was looking at the swearing in of the Antigua ministers in Antigua today. All the ministers who were swearing in are bringing their wives and children onto the podium to take the oath of office with them. We don't have that kind of royal pomposity in our elections. A minister's wife and children have nothing to do with him taking an oath of office, because it's not a family affair. There's nothing about a first meet. We don't have that. And I'm very sorry. We saw copycat in Dominica. Those little juju we have in Dominica running our country might just copy so the next election. I think it was very distasteful to see that every minister who went up, their wives and little children following them up, like as if to say they're taking the oath for the family and not taking the oath for the country. You know, so we need a lot of shifts, you know. We need a lot of minds to come together. And I'll be looking very closely at the next government that gets into power in Dominica. And as much as I am critical of this government now, I can assure you I'll be equally and steadfastly critical of any incumbent government in Dominica who thinks that they're just going to continue with business as usual. Dominica cannot continue with business as usual. Our democracy has to be strengthened, and we have to seriously look at our elections, and our elections are influenced, and most particularly I would put check on the constitutional separation of powers.
Lambi, you want to take a call?
Yes. Caller, please go ahead.
Yes, I have to call back very quickly. First of all, I want to.
You need to make it quick because we're going to wind down in a minute.
Yes. Okay, quickly. Going back to what Justice Andrews said, the Constitution does not say that something is unconstitutional when the court decides. It says in section 117 that any act that is inconsistent with the Constitution shall be void. The idea that we have adopted in Dominica, and probably around the world as well, that things must be challenged for us to keep the Constitution is also a violation of the Constitution. It just goes to show that we don't understand it. The idea behind the Constitution is that the Constitution should never be violated, because everyone should understand that they should do everything in their power as individuals. That's why every officer of the government takes the oath. You take the oath not to violate the Constitution, to protect it and to defend it, not to wait until a court decides, until somebody challenges you. That is not the idea behind the Constitution. We don't understand what the Constitution stands for. Thank you.
Thank you, caller. But I must allow Dr. Andre to answer to this question.
You know, all I'll say is reasonable people can have different opinions. The fact of the matter is the Constitution is not a self-enforcing entity. The fact of the matter is the only way that it could be held that there has been a violation of a constitution is by seeking court intervention to make that finding. Now, Mr. Lincoln may not like it for his reasons. That's his business. That's his privilege. But that is how you challenge actions by state agents. The Constitution will not automatically do that for you. Can't happen. So I'm not going to argue this point. To me, it's self-evident. There has to be a challenge of legislation that allegedly violates the Constitution.
Yes, I think I agree.
Mr. Bruno may disagree with this.
No, I agree. I agree with you. In fact, I was about to say probably the learned caller may not even subscribe to the notion of judicial review, because the judiciary was created for the exact purpose that you said it's created for: to interpret, to look, to solve, to serve as a referee. to call attention to, it may be argued that these were powers that the court gave to itself, albeit, let that be the case. But the judiciary, in terms of the separation of powers in government, was created to do exactly what Justice Andre said, to solve or to seek to be an arbiter when there are questions that infringes on the Constitution. So again, I think I'm sure who called. I am quite familiar with the voice of the caller, and that's an argument that the caller has made for some time. No, I'm not going to challenge the caller and say that the caller is wrong. We can have an agreement. We can have a discussion about it. But you cannot tell me that the court does not have a role to play, and you cannot tell me that another entity must play the role when there's a question of the Constitution. When there's a constitutional question in play, it has to be the court. You cannot just stand back and say, oh, here we go, as Andre said, the Constitution cannot speak. The court speaks for it. And people appeal to the court to answer the questions of the constitutions. And he was right when he said that we had not obeyed or gone by the Dominican Constitution. He talked about Patrick John. When Patrick John was changed, the parliament was called in the absence of any standard procedure. We know that. So that was correct. But to come back and say that the court has no right to say when there is a question and how you solve the question, that is, I think it's a bit radical, a bit out of what we understand the judiciary to be.
Yeah, well, thanks a lot, Alex. But Crispin, in terms of the suggestions that we have coming through now on changes to the Constitution to prevent all this excessive power in the hands of one man and get better with an accountable government, I personally think that I like the idea of 2 terms. I like the idea of a fixed date for elections. I like the idea of a radical change to the Constitution so that you elect a prime minister. You don't really have all these constituencies. So you're going to elect all these MPs. I rather you elect a prime minister, let the prime minister, the Constitution determine how many members in the cabinet. Let him come with his cabinet, and after the 2 terms, he goes with his cabinet. I like that. I mean, that's American model. I like that. I'm not sure what other people's views are on that. But certainly, I believe that in order to give the grassroots level people a say in the legislature, because they know what they want in their communities, they know what they want for health, for education, for the economics, and so on. I like the idea of getting the village councils to establish themselves at a fairly high level and let those 2 or 3 of these members of these village councils form a part of this legislature. They would have staff, of course, the lawyers and so on to help them to create laws. But I like the idea of the ideas coming, the legislation coming from the grassroots minds.
Well, my view is that it's going to be very important for us to devolve power to the villages. We have a good system. We had a good system of local government, which Mr. LeBlanc, others like Simeon's father really put in place in the 1960s, 1970s. I think that it's a tragedy that the way the village councils have been used is as pass-through entities for money to people in the villages. And to the extent that village councils have serious corruption problems, accountability problems, and even when the director of audit will do audits of village councils, they don't implement what the auditors say should be done. So that's one of the things I think. But I'd like to see in a new constitution a devolution of power away from central government. It's too centralized, and it's gotten worse over the last 20 years. I mean, even to the extent now that central government feel they have to organize village feasts. I mean, come on. You don't need government to do that for you. Before government was involved in that, it was the people at the village level who did things for themselves. So that's one. The other thing another issue that I think that has to be addressed in a new constitution is the role of the diaspora. The diaspora people the Constitution bars people who have dual citizenship from running for office. Now, a significant part of our population is in the diaspora. So you're telling me that the diaspora, you can send money home, but you can't participate in elections as candidates. I think that is something that we got to revisit, because more than half of our population is in the diaspora, or they go to the diaspora. So why, remove them from participating in the process? And we've had some cases here in Dominica, and that's a problem not only unique to Dominica. Many of the other islands, St. Vincent has that problem, Jamaica has that problem. It is because we have not accorded the diaspora its rightful role. So that is another thing. On the question of the Electoral Commission, I think that there's a lot that has to be done to bring the reform that is needed. We have not scratched the surface of reforming of the Electoral Commission, and the Electoral Commission is not doing its work. So herein raises the question which Mr. Gregor Nassif raised. In fact, he called for the commission members to resign. I think that the commission members should examine their usefulness to the country and decide for themselves that they really have become irrelevant and they should resign. They should resign. Now the question is, do you replace them with other party hacks? The question is, in the reform of the Electoral Commission, the notion of good governance must reign. You cannot have people there who have conflict of interest. They will never do the work of the Dominican people, but they will do the work of their own so they can survive as agents in contract with the government for whatever reason. So these things, you have to sanitize the Electoral Commission. And until we do that, we will not have free and fair elections. And let me say last thing, Mr. G. I don't believe that the current Electoral Commission and the office of the Chief Elections Officer is capable of running a free and fair election next time around. And what I would like to see, and I'm going to promote that with the opposition, that we call on the international community to come and supervise the elections in Dominica, because I don't think that Electoral Commission is capable of giving us a free and fair election. The second thing I must say, Dominica has signed up to a number of rules, international rules about democracy. And Dominica must be held to account for that. And I'm saying that the next election that we have in Dominica, there must be foreign intervention as far as making sure that we have a free and fair election, because our Electoral Commission has abdicated its responsibility and really should do the honorable thing, resign, and let us have a new group of people with I'm talking about the majority here, with no conflict of interest. And until such time, let us hope that we can have a free and fair election in Dominica.
Yes, I will presume that this would be your closing remarks, Christian.
Yes.
Right. So now I want to go to Alex, because I remember on this panel on the Global View on Q, we had some discussions in the past, and Dr. Andre is very familiar with those discussions about the amendments to the Constitution and amendments to the Electoral Commission itself. And I believe we had proposed, in fact, that the Electoral Commission should be broadened to include representatives, not just of each political party, but like the Chamber of Commerce, the Bar Association, Employers Federation, the clergy, the trade unions, civil society, and so on. And also we had made some serious suggestions about the reform of the Constitution itself, because this thing really, the fact that you don't have a separation of the powers, you don't have a separation of the executive branch and the judiciary and the legislative branch, it's a serious problem, because here is what you have now. You have one man selecting candidates for all the constituencies. You have one man deciding who's going to be cabinet ministers. You have that same man is heading whatever it is going on in the parliament, and all this yes, the people who are in there are just people who are handpicked and who are yes men. How is this really working out? I mean, we have seen the disaster that has created for us in Dominica. So, Simeon, let me just go to you to your closing remarks on this.
What will be my closing remarks? I want to focus my closing remarks on the opposition. Because if we are to segue to any away from what we have now, I would say from looking on the outside and being hard to verify the internal state of the opposition organization, we need to look at what might be the right benchmarks, okay, that the opposition would need to consider. So I think I would suggest 3 ground games, 3 for benchmarks. One is, I think they need to look at preparation of candidates, where the opposition parties don't just select candidates, but they train them in policy, they train them in communication, and they train them in constituency work, okay? Because this is what's going to make strong candidates. And they have to prepare their candidates as to what they stand for, how to carry the message across. Communication is very important in campaigning and doing what you need to do for winning an election and doing the constituency work. You cannot be going up for election and not being on the ground, deeply rooted, penetrating every vein and artery of a constituency. Tailcoating and carpet bagging does not always work, okay? And secondly, I would suggest to them that they would need to have a clear platform and a slogan that was mentioned to earlier. Alex made reference to it, where you have a coherent, simple message that connects to everyday life, referring to things like the cost of living, jobs, services, and governance. What matters more than a long manifesto? You know, for my part, 90% of manifestos, and I have manifestos going back to 1970 for maybe all the political parties, you know, and I don't think in most of the political parties, the only manifesto I remember and I can say safely where you had over 80% of the items fulfilled was in the 1975 manifesto of the Dominican Labour Party, where only 3 items were not accomplished. Okay, and that's clear. Anybody can go and read it. I have all the manifestos. You know, some of them got wet by Hurricane David and they're stuck together like blocks, but you've read them. And so we have to understand that apart from those long things, focus on what connects to everyday life of Dominicans. How are you reaching the sportsman? How are you reaching the farmer, the fisherman, the nurse, the doctor, the teacher, the unemployed youth? You know, how are you reaching them? What is their life like? You know, Bill Clinton said, is the economy stupid? And that resonated with people. And jobs, services, I mean, the governance, the port, connect with people. And lastly, what is obvious for any political campaign, the ground game, registration of new voters, reconfirmation. I am totally not happy with the opposition. I don't hear them organizing buses for people to go to reconfirm. I'm not hearing organizing them zonal meetings or community meetings, encouraging people to go and reconfirm. I'm not hearing of any group of how you call it now, select group of people from different constituencies who are going out there and making sure that they go through the voters list and making sure that they go to people to call them to reconfirm and gathering and harnessing them. It's a very lazy effort, I find, on the part of the opposition. They get off their butt and go and make sure that I just got the latest confirmation while I'm on the program tonight of the latest confirmation list, and it's seriously lacking. If you look at the one for April, you know, and I sent it to 2 people who have since told me that they don't see their names on the list. But when you look at certain constituencies, I noticed Soufriere, I noticed Cottage, I noticed Cassibus are very long compared to more populated constituencies where the opposition is strong, like Marigot and Goodwill and Salisbury. Take a look at it. Serious concern. And of course, they have to look at turnout operations are often more decisive than speeches. What you call the get out the vote. What you do, what is your game plan, your ground plan to make sure people go out and vote for you. So there's a saying that goes, all politics is local. And that is exactly right. Who is knocking on the doors? Who are solving small problems and building trust? You don't see that. You don't see that. And I can be very critical about some of the opposition people. Where is the connection in the local sportsmen and the local cultural enthusiasts and the local community groups and the mothers? Where is it? So you have to have a ground game if you want to play politics. And I want to end by making one very sobering statement. If the opposition forces in Dominica are not ready and they are not doing this by now, any election coming up soon will be too late.
Thank you, Simeon. Now, Dr. Andre, in your closing remarks, I'm going to go to Alex now, but in your closing remarks, I don't know if you'll recall that when we had the discussions on the constitutional reform, because Crispin mentioned the role of the diaspora, and the constitution to make provisions for the diaspora to participate in elections, I believe there had been some recommendation, because I think the countries like France have done that, and they allocated a couple of constituencies for the diaspora. You might want to reflect on that and maybe refer to that in your closing remarks. But let me go to Alex now for your closing remarks, Alex. You're muted.
Okay, well, I am just here sitting back, reflecting on how interesting this program has been. And at moments, I wished I were in the audience, because I think I might have taken in a bit more. So thanks for the contribution made by all the members of the panel. And I'm looking forward to being part of and also taking in the information that you, Mr. G, and the Global View continue to disseminate. I believe probably we might even be ahead of our time in terms of what we are saying. But it's good that we are saying it so that the future administration can be guided by some of the things that I think we need to do to restore good faith in governance in Dominica. I continue to lament, however, that we need to win, because the only way you could change a policy, you could have a reform, you could do all the wonderful things that we need to do for Dominica is to get the reins of governance, because the current incumbent will not do it. And Simeon called it right about where focus is being placed on the reconfirmation. And I, again, in a report that I made earlier, talk about the way in which the consultation of the reform went. It went pretty much in the favor of one party, one man. So what we have really is a situation that we have to get people out to understand that we need a different kind of team to be in office, to fix, to normalize things again. So all of the ideas that we spoke about should be condensed into a campaign slogan, campaign message, ground game. Because being on the ground and taking photos and showing that you're distributing stuff to people is not necessarily a campaign election winning strategy. The strategy is to coordinate with people who can win. Have a message, as Ruzi did have. Of course, he came with the corruption stuff, which worked as well, but it was a message. It was something that worked. So we have to find something that works in the opposition and make it catch a fire. Let it go viral. Win, and let's fix Dominica together. That's my final words.
Thank you, Alex. Crispin, before I go to Dr. Andre, is there any final word that you would like to just leave with us before you go?
Well, all I want to say is that the people really need to take seriously the reconfirmation. That I implore all Dominicans, irrespective of political affiliation, to get confirmed. Don't wait for October to come and you've not yet reconfirmed. I would say for the opposition parties, they need to focus on this quarter, this 3 months that's coming up from May, June, July. If by July they have not gotten a substantial number of their supporters reconfirmed, then they're going to have a problem at the polls. So I can't, I need to underscore the vital importance of Dominicans who are adults, 18 years old, they register, and those who are on the list now to be reconfirmed. We need that for the future of the Dominica democracy. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Crispin. Dr. Andre, you have the final word?
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and I thank those who've taken the time to listen to us and so on. These are important issues. There's one thing in terms of the participation of the diaspora. Now, we've canvassed that extensively in previous editions of the Global View on Q. We've looked at the Israeli situation. We've looked at the France model, the US model, the Canadian model. Certainly, with respect to the Canadian model, and I had a big debate with your Attorney General about a particular case and the essence of that case. The gravamen of the case is this. In terms of the Canadian model, participation of the diaspora in the voter process is allowed for one most important reason. It will not skew the outcome of the elections. And the significance of that caveat is this. You are having government by the people, of the people, for the people. In other words, in essence, the government is for those who live in Dominica. Whether you say they live there or they are habitually residing in Dominica, it doesn't really matter. Because they will be affected by the policies of that government. So you can't have some tourist diasporans coming and voting and running back with the tail between their legs and preaching to those who they've condemned to a life of poverty that they exercise in their democratic right. What democratic right? If you're talking about democratic, well, come back and live in Dominica. So you have to also pay for the $18.95 per gallon of gas without any state benefits. You have to be content to get $10 an hour. Don't preach from abroad where you are insulating from these hardships. Come down and experience the debilitating effects of bad governance right here in Dominica. So it's all well and good to have the diaspora participate. There's nothing wrong in principle, except that you have to ask yourself, who should decide which government should govern those on the ground? That is the central question. In terms of electoral reform, someone pointed out to me correctly, and I think that point is well known, that Sir Byron had also recommended the expansion of, I think Mr. G mentioned it this evening, the expansion of the Electoral Commission. But let me ask you this, because it amplifies my point. Changes in the electoral process can only be done by the people exercising the franchise and voting a particular government. Because we know that this government, the last thing they want is to have an expanded electoral commission with, God forbid, with independent people on it. That's what they don't want. They have shown that because they rejected Sir Byron's recommendations. They rejected recommendations along the same lines based on all those editions, as I said, Mr. G, of Global View on Q that you hosted. But it's obvious. If they're talking about electoral reform threatening the electoral legacy of the incumbent, then what the hell do you expect? Huh? Do you expect somebody will be saved on the road to Damascus and change? You are dreaming in Technicolor. The money is too good. There are too many tens or hundreds of $millions hidden in mysterious accounts. There are too many people with mysterious wealth buying properties all over Dominica. There are too many people running to Dubai to hide money. So don't come and preach to me or tell me about electoral reform. It will not happen. It will only happen when Dominica comes to their senses and decide to take over their own governance through the electoral process. That is the only salvation. Not on the road to Damascus, not baptism in the Layo River, but that is the only salvation that will change Dominica. A conscious growth, a very strong growth in consciousness, what the Germans call a Bildungsgrummen, in the thinking of Dominica, that they have to start to act in their own best interest. Otherwise, we're dreaming in Technicolor. But I don't want to leave on that sad note. I would rather live on the note that encourages persons, as I said, who have nothing to gain but everything to lose, who call the radio station, who propose changes, who express themselves, who support initiatives to raise funds, who go to meetings. These are the people who carry the future of Dominica on their shoulders, and we have to support them as best as we can. It's as simple as that. Not some of the degreed folks, quite frankly, who shut up and they sit on the sidelines waiting for a change so they can jump and shout, what's it again? Hule, I even forgot. Anyway, I leave those thoughts with our listeners, Mr. G. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And the panelists, they did an excellent job.
Yes, thanks out to Andre. And let me just take the opportunity to thank all those folks who are with us on Facebook, on YouTube throughout. Thank you so much for staying with us tonight. Where I hope we imparted some knowledge that was of some use to you, and that I hope the opposition forces, in fact, will be guided by some of the recommendations that we have made here on this panel tonight. So it's just left for me to thank you, Simeon, and thank Crispin, and thank you, Alex, and Dr. Andre, and Lambi, and Sherwin, for participating here tonight. Really appreciate it. Really great show, great contributions. So good night, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you, folks.
Okay.
Good night, everybody.
Take care.
Yeah, sure.
Global View on Q, the big station. Insights into where the people of Dominica and the Caribbean came from. Understanding our past. Embracing our present. Charting the way forward into our future. Together, eliminating poverty. Embracing justice, peace, and togetherness. The Global View on Q. Networking Dominica with the rest of the